Aaron Welty is a native of southeast Michigan who was born 10 weeks premature and diagnosed with cerebral palsy. His mother and father made the decision to treat him as a normal kid, to challenge Aaron instead of coddling him. As a result of his upbringing, Aaron was determined to do his best to make a difference. When only 13 years old, Aaron knew he wanted to work on Capitol Hill with Congress. For the past 5 years, he's been working as a legislative assistant to Representative Thaddeus McCotter. Aaron hopes to continue working to bring attention to many important issues.
When I was born at 30 weeks, I was severely underdeveloped, and there were some issues with like blood and fluid on the brain. And when that happens, one of two things will generally occur. Either the cranial cavity will grow larger to accommodate the extra material that's there, or the pressure will take part of the brain and crush it and render it inoperable. And the second thing, the crushing of part of the brain and rendering it inoperable, is what happened to me. As a result of that and some other things that happened really early on, I came to understand that I have cerebral palsy. And again, my understanding is that once you have it, you have it. As you grow up and you get older, it's kind of like arthritis, I guess. The things just get difficult, and the weather starts to affect things, and you have to deal with a lot of pain. And so I've just kind of dealt with that, and I do what I have to do, and then I decided to come here and be in this environment on top of all that. So.
But it's a physical disability and not a mental disability, correct?
Well, it can be both. In my case, it's more physical. For example, when I was born, the doctor said, he'll never walk, he'll be severely mentally impaired, he'll always be a burden to those around him and those taking care of him, and he'll never really accomplish much in his life.
Well, that was a pretty picture, wasn't it?
No, and I'm very fortunate that my mom and my dad and my grandma kind of looked at the doctors and said, well, we don't believe you, and we're going to see what happens.
Aaron, tell me a little bit about your boss, briefly, and what it is that you do for him.
Okay. The congressman that I work for is Thaddeus McCotter from Michigan's 11th District. It's southeast Michigan, outside of Detroit. From a young age, about 13 years old, I knew that I wanted to come to Washington, D.C. and to work in Congress. I began to realize around that time that I was born in America. I could have been born somewhere else in the early 80s, where I would not necessarily have been safe and my life wouldn't have been as secure as it is. And so I had to find a way to kind of give back. Friends of mine had suggested, why don't you go to Washington? And I kind of grabbed that idea and ran with it. Here we are. It's tougher than people think, and I work on a portfolio of about a dozen different issues, and among those, religious freedom and the pro-life issue and family issues and education. I really do enjoy working on the pro-life issue, partially because of my own story that we're telling today, and the fact that I'm still here when I should not be.
One of the greatest concerns Aaron faced when coming to Washington, D.C. was how he'd get around the city. Fortunately, his dad came up with a creative means of transportation in which Aaron could navigate the city. He's even been contacted by NASA with questions about his unusual vehicle.
Aaron, tell me about the Phoenix project, version 4.2 now.
Oh gosh, I love the Phoenix project. That came out of just my need to be able to safely get around the different places that I was at. The current iteration, 4.2, is what I use to get around Washington. And basically what it is it's a old three-wheeled scooter that I used to use in college, and it had died out. And my dad got it running again. That's part of the reason why we call it the Phoenix. And he built this sort of space-age looking cockpit shell around it with headlights and taillights and a fan and just all sorts of different switches and things. And when I drive around it, I'm pretty much completely covered, and I'm safe and away from the wind and rain and snow. And I've kind of developed a bit of a reputation on Capitol Hill because of it, because I'm the only one in the world who has one because, you know, my dad built it for me.
And it's really cool.
Well, thank you very much. We happen to think so too. I have a good friend. He once explained the relationship I have with the Phoenix as basically the Phoenix is Superman's cape. And it's the thing that gets everybody's attention. And then you get to stop and introduce yourself and tell them about what the Phoenix is. And then they'll start asking other questions, which leads you to kind of explain the backstory to my life in terms of just the pro-life angle and what it was like growing up, and just the wonderful Christian family that I got to grow up in. And
how do you think it impacts them?
you know, in more cases than not, I think the conversation gets to a point where it kind of gets them thinking in terms of, well, maybe these folks who have difficulty, you know, getting around, maybe the perception that I have of them and what their life is like isn't quite what it really is. I mean, because if you're able to get around in something like that and look like you're mobile and you're able to just continue and have life be as, you know, quote unquote normal as possible, it's like, well, maybe the perception that society has for these kind of folks and the circumstances of how they came into the world and the things that they deal with, that their quality of life is actually possible and it's good. And I think that is able to serve as a good counterweight to one of the prevailing pieces of wisdom in society right now that's erroneous, that says the quality of life for these folks really isn't possible. So in more cases than not, we shouldn't give them the chance of life that they deserve.